Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our third session or third webinar of Ramadan's annual series of webinars organized by EduCast International. This is Mohammed Nabil, the founder of EduCast International, conference organizer, a podcaster, and teacher trainer. And today I'm joined by the educational consultant at EduCast International, Dr. Ron Morrain, and he's also the educational expert and consultant at Syntax Solutions. Netherlands is also a professor at one of the most reputable universities in Germany. He's a well-known conference speaker, right? And he's well-known over the social media. Yes, he's famous. So everyone, let's welcome Dr. Ron Morrain, a great friend, colleague, and mentor. Let's welcome him. And today he is talking about teacher identity. Hello, Ron. How are you doing?
Hello, Mohammed, and I hope that everybody's having a wonderful Ramadan. And I know I just got back from Saudi Arabia. We were just talking about that, and I was lucky enough to be in Saudi Arabia at the beginning of Ramadan, which was also a wonderful experience. But of course, sadly, I had to fly back. But it's Ramadan all over the world. Okay, it's just not
Yeah,
Ramadan
it's
there;
not only there.
it's everywhere. Yeah. And today I got to go and have my little experience as well too. Had to get to the store to pick up some food to enjoy my food with my family. Uh, and so, yeah, but before I get started, Mohammed, I want to ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
And that is, I think it's not, we can't argue really too much about what Ramadan is. I think it means different things for different people. But what would you say are some of the key words that people here today who are listening, what would be some of the key things that Ramadan is all about?
Well, I can sum up the whole thing when I say empathy, right?
Hmm.
Putting yourself in front of other people's shoes or in other people's shoes, um, feeling their suffering, fasting, worshiping God. So lots of things you can say. It's one of the greatest months to Muslims. Um, so yes, so it's fasting. It's the month of empathy and worship.
Well, I think there's a word missing there, and I think that word is reflection.
Yeah, that's right. It's reflection. Yeah. So actually, today we're talking about reflection. Yeah. Yeah,
And
because
that
we're
is
talking about teacher
why,
identity.
yeah, that the reason I asked you that is because that is one of the reasons that I actually chose the theme of teacher identity, because I think it sort of fits in with the Ramadan, season, the Ramadan time when we do reflect. We reflect about a lot of things. And today we're just going to talk about teacher identity and reflect about that and what really is teacher identity. And so if you look in the chat box, today I'd like to just, it's Ramadan. I want to be a little bit more lax and keep it more, uh, I would say, relaxed. And so I put in the chat box some of the things that I'm going to cover today. So if you look in the chat box, and for those of you who just got online right now, you might not see it. So I put it again inside the chat box for you. Okay, it's right there. Uh, but we're talking about teacher identity, and I think before I could actually answer the question about what is teacher identity, we got to talk about our perception of our world, and the world around us, and social constructs, because teacher identity is a construct. It's very different for each individual, because of that we perceive ourselves in different ways. So the one thing where teacher identity starts is the world around us and how we perceive it and the social constructs within that world. Uh, I live in Germany, and so how I understand my culture here in Germany, how I perceive the social constructs of what's right and wrong, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable in this culture. Well, this is going to be very different for me in Germany than it is for you, Mohammed, in Egypt.
Yeah,
And then we had a couple of people here from India. So if you're living in Saudi Arabia, and just because it's a Muslim nation doesn't mean that it's going to be the same. Because I think if you live in Saudi Arabia, it's going to be a little bit, the social constructs are going to be a little bit different than those in Egypt. So, teacher identity starts with how we understand our own identity within the world that we live in. And so that's where it starts. But, in psychology, that has a name. And it's called first language ego development. And the acronym for that is called FLED. So when you ask, you can't really ask somebody, well, what's your FLED? How do you understand your FLED? That's sort of a very difficult, and it almost sounds like a philosophical question, but we do know the answer to what is our FLED. It's not something that we can answer immediately because we do need to reflect. We need time to think about what that really is and how we perceive ourselves. And so, first, language ego development is a natural process. It's happening every day around us. It's unseen. Sometimes we do see it. We are cognizant of the fact that uh, we're growing, we're seeing something new. It's very experiential, and uh, but it's there. This first language ego development. It's with our friends. It's with our. It's at school. It's with our relatives. This is all happening, and when we're young, we're not really aware of that that we're developing within our mother language, in our that world that we live in, and understanding the rules and learning the rules, sometimes learning by doing and making mistakes and being corrected by our parents when we do something wrong, being corrected by our teacher when we make a mistake at school or whatever. But we start to learn the do's and the don'ts, the ups and the downs, the ins and the outs, and the white and the black and the gray areas of our culture. All of this can fall into FLED, which is called first language ego development. But there is something else that happens that, again, we don't always see it, but sometimes it's there. We do become aware of it after a while because of some things happening around us. And that is number three, which you see in the chat box, which is called social capital. And again, we're talking about teacher identity, but all these things lead to the development of teacher identity. And that is our social capital. Now, some people would say, what do you bring to the table? Uh, and that starts with what family we're born into. This is where social capital, starts. What do we inherit from our family, our parents, our aunts and uncles, our cousins? Well, one thing we do inherit is our language. Uh, we inherit our culture. We inherit our belief system. When I say belief system, in this case, I mean religious belief system, because that is separate than, of course, our belief system about uh, social constructs and what is right and what's wrong and within a society. So our social capital plays a big role in how we're going to move in life. If you're born the son of a king, well, you're born with power, position, and privilege. And if you're born the son of a baker, you might be born, well, if your father's a famous baker, well, you definitely are born also with power, position, and privilege, but in a different way. So everybody comes to the table with different social capital. If your mother was a famous professor at university, the expectations on you might be very high because, of course, what she has achieved in her life, people would expect that you would achieve at least the minimum of what she has achieved. So social capital has its good parts and its bad parts, but social capital is also part of how we perceive ourselves, and the position and the power and the privilege that we're born into, and the connections that we get from that will help us to form our identity. Again, social capital can be a very great thing. It can bring a lot of value to your life. We can't put a monetary value on social capital, but it is like money in a society. And that also helps to form our personal understanding of ourselves. And that is number four, which of course is our perception of ourselves. But as we get older and we start making decisions in our life, we start to decide what we want to do in life. And because I assume everybody here is a teacher, uh, you made a decision to be a teacher. And we're talking about teacher identity. So here is when you make that decision to be a teacher, you realize you do have to educate yourself to be a teacher. You have to learn what it is to be a teacher, and you have to grow into that job. Just because you graduate from university with a degree as a in education or uh, other things that you could use to become a teacher. You could become a content teacher, so you don't have to have a degree in education. But as you grow into that role of a teacher, uh, becoming a teacher is not something that's just automatic. When you graduate, like I said, from university, you have to grow into that job, and slowly you will start to develop a perception of yourself within that job. And you will start to see here on, if you look at number, is it number five here? Where is it? Okay, yeah, number five, number six. Okay, uh, you go into the job as a teacher, and you have personal beliefs about what you think a teacher should do, and you have personal beliefs about what you think learning is. And all of that can be based from a combination of what you learned at university, theoretically, what you learned on the job, maybe through teacher training, what maybe other people told you or what you observed. And maybe somebody told you that there's some things you have to believe and do, but there's all that comes together, and that develops our personal beliefs about teaching and learning. So little by little, we're developing this teacher identity because, as I said, and I'm going to repeat real quick here, teacher identity starts with understanding the world around us, the social constructs within that world, and the social capital that we bring to the table, our perception of the roles we play within our environment. And also, another thing that starts to happen is when you start working, you start to develop a sense of empowerment, a sense of being able to make decisions on your own. And that is called teacher agency. Uh, how much empowerment you really, or how much you empower yourself is really important. Where does that come from, this sense of empowerment? Do you feel really good about yourself? Do you feel good about what you're doing as a teacher? Because the better you feel about yourself, uh, the more you're going to have a sense of teacher agency. How much does your employer give you? How much leeway do they give you to make decisions by yourself? Because that also helps you to develop a sense of empowerment. But the next thing that has to do with that, yes, we do make decisions as teachers in the classroom, but how much do those decisions lead to what is called here in number 6, uh, uh, which here you see, uh, I don't know why that list is different there than here. Okay, because the next thing that really comes there is, and I got kind of lost there, but here is, yeah, teacher teacher efficacy. We're at teacher efficacy now. Is, are you having success on the job? Are you able to really feel success? Uh, do you recognize when you make a mistake? And what do you do when you see as a teacher that you made a mistake? How do you correct it? Uh, do you reflect? Because reflection uh, is very important for the development of teacher identity. And so if you're really thinking about what you're doing and uh, trying to correct it and finding solutions, we're in that metacognitive realm now. And that is also an important part of the development of teacher identity. So again, we're talking about teacher identity, but are we really there? Do you really have a sense of what it really is? I think I just led you through maybe some things that help to develop it, but I still haven't answered the question as to what it is really. Uh, and now we get to a little bit more difficult part, because if everybody here is a language teacher, this is where teacher identity can get very complicated, because just like we have fled first language ego development, language teachers have something called SLED, which is second language ego development. And if we speak more than one language, then we are going to have multiple language ego development. And that is me. I speak 3 languages fluently as mother languages. And I found it always difficult for me to understand that. And one of those things I always used to start to hear was, when you change languages, you become another person. Well, to be honest with you, I know there's different sides to that argument as to whether we change personalities when we change languages. I personally believe that the answer is no. We don't change personalities. We just change the way we operate and communicate in those languages, because we know that those languages have different rules. And we know the rules because those languages are real to us. English is my mother language, and I operate in American English and British English pretty well too. I lived and worked in London, and I understand and can survive and operate within a British English world, uh, because that's my mother language and I understand the rules. I grew up with it. Uh, Spanish, well, my father's Spanish, and so I grew up with that. I speak fluent Spanish and basically understand the rules. I make grammar mistakes because I never really learned it at school. I just sort of learned it by doing and being around Spanish speaking people in Spanish speaking countries. And I know that just because I speak Spanish doesn't mean that I know all the rules to all the cultures that speak Spanish, but I pretty much well can survive because I understand that. Um, and German, well, speak it like a mother language. I live and work here. I understand the rules. I understand the social constructs. Uh, I get a sense of agency and empowerment within the language. And I feel a sense of success in the language. I understand all of those things. This is where teacher identity for language teachers can get complicated if you do not feel good about how you develop in the second language that you're teaching. And I have met many teachers who are English teachers, but not native English speakers. And how can sometimes, like I just said, I can operate within different languages because I lived in those cultures. I grew up with them. They're part of me. They're part of my ego development, which we call in psychology. This is just part of who we are. We can't take that away from us. Uh, Without that, we're nothing. So how do you see yourself uh, in that second language is really important, which is called SLED, second language ego development. How far are you? Well, I am going to just move my screen here real quick because I need to get to something really here real quick. Oh my God, all these windows open. Okay. I want to start to answer the question really quick of what is uh, teacher identity? Uh, there are several points as to what really teacher identity is. And the first thing that comes to mind is, again, like I said, your self concept of yourself, that understanding of yourself. How do you see yourself? How do you see your role uh, in that job as a teacher? How deeply are you motivated about that job? And what are your teaching methods? That's part of teacher identity. You've got to be able to talk about that. Uh, and how adaptable are you? This is also something very important. Are we still there, Mo? Hello? Okay. There we see that.
Yes, we're
Okay.
still there. Yes,
Yeah, I was
yes.
just wondering. Yeah, the screen just popped up there. Okay, but I like the way the screen is now. Okay, good, great. We're answering the question, what is teacher identity? And I have to say, again, it's self-concept, your perception of yourself, uh, your motivation levels, your teaching methods and understanding those methods and what you use in the classroom, what works and doesn't work for you, your how you adapt within your learning teaching environment or learning teaching context, and the influences that are coming at you as a person, how you deal with that as a person, uh, and how you interact with other people. Are you interacting with other people? Are you a teacher that's getting involved? Are you involved in a personal professional learning network? Because that helps us to develop our teacher identity. And again, those personal beliefs that we bring to the table, our values, our experiences. Do we share our experiences with people? And not just the positive experiences, but sometimes the negative experiences, because we can learn from that or other people can learn from us. And again, part of that teacher identity is how we understand our cultural background, our social capital, and what we bring to the table as an individual, as a human being. But there's other things that we have to talk about when we talk about teacher identity. And I'm just going to go back over here really quick, okay? Because I have so many screens open here. Uh, is we we sometimes just can't get a grasp of it, of all these things happening around us as a teacher as we grow and we develop. But there are things that can get in the way of us developing ourselves and developing our teacher identity and feeling good about it, and feeling successful as a teacher, as a person who's an educator, and working with other people. And one of them is ambiguity, that role that we play. Are we clear about that? Uh, can we describe that to somebody? Because that's really the number one thing. Can I describe what I do as a teacher? First to myself, have I ever really thought about it? That's that metacognitive thing. Have I really just mind mapped and brainstormed with myself to answer the question, what do I do? What do I do as a teacher? And am I doing what I believe I'm doing? Have I reflected on what goes on in the classroom? And am I aware when I make mistakes, and how do I correct them? And how do I deal with my other colleagues? That's all these things that happen within that role that we play as a teacher. Again, that helps to develop that teacher identity. Another thing that helps to develop the teacher identity is actually a negative thing, and that's stress. Uh, Fatma talked about stress the other day, but stress plays a major role in our teacher, the development of our teacher identity. Is our Do we feel like we're getting burnout on the job? Do we feel that we're doing too much? Are we doing too much because they're pushing us too much, expecting too much of us? Is it my director that's expecting too much of me, asking me to do too much, or are my students asking too much of me? Are the students giving me stress? And we got to deal with that. That's not something we can just ignore. But the sooner we deal with that, the better we might be able to have a clearer uh, a definition of, or and a feeling of efficacy, success on the job. Another thing that can get in the way, and challenges that we have to develop ourselves as teachers, are those external pressures that we feel that we have as a teacher, especially if you're a primary or secondary school teacher, because you got to deal with parents, and those are external factors. And we got to learn to deal with that. And how do we deal with that? Are we having success in the way we deal with that? Are we really thinking about that? Uh, Another thing that helps to develop our teacher identity is, how do we deal with change? The things that are changing around us, the rules, the technology, the society expectations of us as a teacher. How do we deal with all of those things? And does it cause us stress? Another thing that we need to deal with, and I always say this, I say this to many school directors, owners of schools, please do not hire a teacher who's not involved in a professional learning network, because connectivity is an extremely important part of teacher identity development. Teachers who are isolate themselves for one reason or another, there's always an explanation for it, but lone wolves in a group of teachers might not be a positive thing. And usually school directors, they don't usually like that, because this could lead to problems down the road. We need teachers to work together, to collaborate with one another, exchange ideas, share experiences. And this is why professional learning networks, or groups of teachers, and sometimes teachers don't understand that staff meetings are really important, because that helps to build a sense of team, and collaboration within teachers. So this is an important part of teacher identity development, is how do you collaborate with others, or are you a lone wolf and isolate yourself? Because then this will, of course, hinder your teacher identity development. Uh, and another thing that helps to develop our teacher identity is our personal life balance, our work life balance. Do we have a healthy work life balance? If we don't, that's going to really stress us out and really hinder us, and it's going to be a burden on you. So we always have to be dealing with that. But the last thing that can be a challenge for us to develop our teacher identity is our career development. What are we doing to develop ourselves as individuals, as teachers, and our career? Where do we see ourselves in 1 year? Where do we see ourselves in 2 years? And is this realistic? These goals that we're setting for ourselves. These are some of the challenges that we must overcome in order to develop a positive, healthy teacher identity. Another thing that we've got to also think about is I talked about connecting with other teachers in a personal learning network. Uh, but within those networks, these little groups, they can sometimes be little cliques. We want to look for authentic connection. Authentic connection is that I really care about being in this group, and the others in this group care about being in this group, and we truly share and open up and learn from one another. Uh, Another thing we've got to think about when we're developing this: have I accepted the fact that as a teacher, I also have to be a lifelong learner? This is really important. And can I prove to myself that I can set a goal and reach that goal and make a plan to reach that goal and prove to myself that I'm a lifelong learner, and not just to somebody else, but am I doing it because I really want to grow? So you got to have a grow mentality, a growth mentality. And that means, of course, being a lifelong learner. Uh, and what are you doing to innovate your teaching practice? Well, we know that technology plays a huge role in what happens in the classroom. And I hear so many people say that they don't like artificial intelligence. They're not allowed to use telephones in the room. They don't have any laptops. They low resource classroom. Well, everybody has a different learning teaching context. We've got to come to terms with it. But even within whatever it is, low resource or high resource, how can we see ourselves innovating our teaching practice, changing and improving it, learning a theory and then trying to apply it? This, of course, helps to develop our teacher identity. And what about reflective practice? How often do we sit down and really think about what we're doing and ask ourselves, what happened in that classroom? What went right? What went wrong? How could I do it better? How is it going to look like next time? Let me draw a little script of how it might look, or maybe just a simple mind map, something. But, reflective practice is really important to the development of a positive, healthy teacher identity. Another thing is, and I'm going to repeat myself here, yes, we need to be in a personal, professional learning network, but am I a collaborator? Or I'm just sitting there taking it in, seeing what I can hear. Am I really collaborating, participating actively in that group? What do I bring to that group? And whatever it is that I bring to that group, uh, am I building something, helping to build something? What is it that I'm helping to build? This will help, okay, to uh, solidify your position in that group, in your personal professional learning network. I know that when I'm in a learning network, I just don't want to, do a lot of blah, blah, blah. I really want to set some goals, not only for myself, but with the other people in the group, that we're all working towards something, and that we're not just spinning our wheels and wasting time, that we really have are focused on a set goal, and that we all try to work with each other and motivate each other to reach that goal, and that we're building something. Uh, and this, of course, the indirect uh, 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 repercussions of development of building something is the development of your teacher identity. Uh, so Well, there's a lot of things that I've already said already about teacher identity. Uh, and I talked about second language ego development and first language ego development. But, we've got to be proactive in our teacher identity development. So here are some things I'd like to tell you about. How can we be proactive to, I said, join a teacher professional learning network with your colleagues. But, this is something I find really strange sometimes. It's an oxymoron with a when I see how other teachers operate is they never really think about certain things. And uh, I always say, well, can you answer certain questions at a job interview? And if you can answer certain questions at a job interview and really practice, even though you're not applying for a job, and it's just good to know the answers to what is your TPACs, for example, your technology, pedagogical, and content knowledge. What is that? Can you talk about your TPAC? In other words, how do you use technology in the classroom? How do you understand your pedagogical understanding of teaching and learning in the classroom? And what is your content knowledge? If you're a language teacher and your content knowledge is just grammar and preparing somebody for IELTS, well, you know, it needs to be a little bit more than that, because that's only a very small part of what language learning is really all about, exam oriented learning. So you got to really be able to answer that question, what is your TPAC? But the really second most important question is, what is your teaching philosophy? Can you answer that question? If you follow me on social media, you will see that I have very detailed, self-directed learning things on LinkedIn as well as on Facebook for you to go to learn what TPAC is and how to be able to answer that question in order to help you to develop. Uh, and I have to develop your TPAC, but also you can go and find this is I don't know how many, I would say 500,000 people have already seen the article that I wrote about teaching philosophy and what that really is. Because if teachers cannot answer the two most important questions at a job interview, what is your TPAC and what is your teaching philosophy, then you haven't really taken the time to develop your teacher identity. And this, again, is what we're talking about with teacher identity uh, and all those things that you need to know. And it's not something we can just clarify and deal with here very quickly. My goal today was to get you into that understanding what it is and what it takes to develop that and to make a little plan for yourself, start becoming aware of it, and so that you might want to be able to get to the point where you can answer those two questions. What is your TPAC and what is your teaching philosophy? Because if you can answer that, you're talking about teacher identity. You're talking about all of those different things that I've mentioned here. That means that you've reflected, you've taken time to create plans for yourself. You understand what you're doing. You understand what's happening in that classroom. You understand learning and teaching uh, frameworks at a higher level, not just from theory, but from practice itself. And these are the very important things, like I said, to develop your teaching learning, your teacher identity. Mo, I want to thank you very much for inviting me today to talk about teacher identity. And I'm going to ask you to quit sharing screens because I think I want to look inside the chat box now and see if there was any comments, or did you notice anything, Mo, that maybe we could, does anybody have any questions?
Thanks a lot for this wonderful talk about teacher identity, and it's a really important topic for any teacher. And we're honored to have Fatma here as well. Yeah, she was the previous speaker, and now she's attending this talk with us, and she's saying in the chat box, "I really wish more people attended this session to know and understand that we need to extend so much beyond curriculum and textbooks." Um,
Well, Fatma asks a very important question
yeah,
because,
how can you develop your teaching
how do you
philosophy?
develop your teaching philosophy? Well,
Yeah,
that's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's a process. And I think the key word there is develop, because development is a process. And you've got to start somewhere. You've got to start with uh, reflecting on what you've been doing in the classroom, and can you bring it to the point uh, of whatever is happening in that classroom, connected to a framework, a theory. Do you know your theories of teaching? What are the methodologies that you use? Because when you're talking about, teaching philosophy, and the statement that you make when you say this is my teaching philosophy, well, you got to back that up, and it has to be backed up with evidence-based things. You can't say things that, well, I believe in NLP and say that's what I do in the classroom, because I might tell you, you probably won't get a job in Europe. Okay, some people might accept that, but most schools wouldn't, not state schools, because they don't feel that that's evidence-based. But here is what a great question. Developing your teaching philosophy means doing research, reading, and reflecting. I call it the 3 R's of research. And research means read. So you're reading up on the different theories and methodologies and ideas about teaching and learning. And let's face it here, teaching is not the same thing as learning. These are two different things. So what is your concepts of teaching, and what are your concepts of learning? How do you understand learning? How do you understand, if you're working with primary school students, how do you understand that? Secondary school, that's also different. University students, because our teaching learning context does help us to develop our teaching identity and also our teaching philosophy. And you've got to, what about that experiential aspect of it? How do I reflect? How do I get to that metacognitive stage of really thinking about what's going on in these different situations that I'm in? Did I reflect about what went right, what went wrong? How did I correct it? Because that's also part of teaching philosophy as well. I mean, when you get to that metacognitive level, that you really thought about it. But in the end, it takes no. I want to say that I will never show my first teaching philosophy paper that I turned in when I first became a teacher, because I'm embarrassed. And I think all of us look back and think, wow, I can't believe that I said that. I can't believe that I believed that. But I'm 65 years old now. And if I look back and don't think that, then something went wrong, because we grow, we develop, we learn, and we do know what we did wrong. And I think a lot of older teachers say, God, I feel so sorry for some of those students that I tortured with what I was doing. But I'm learning by doing. I have to say, my teaching philosophy took about, when I was really came to the point of positive teacher efficacy, which means this feeling of success. Uh, I was about 30 years old. I had been teaching for about 5 years already, and my teaching philosophy was changing very quickly. Every year, I was learning new things. I was learning the theory uh, that I learned at school wasn't really working for me. I started reading and researching some more, learning from doing, learning from other colleagues. I was always involved, and I would say by the time I was 30, I developed what was the basis now of my present teaching philosophy. I started to understand a lot of things about teaching and learning from just doing, getting in the classroom. And one of my, you know, friends, Heather Hansen, who wrote a book about unmute yourself. I once asked her, what should a new teacher do once they finish school? And she said, get in the classroom, jump in there, and just start doing it. Because it's only from doing it that you're going to be able to develop your teaching philosophy. And let us not forget that we're talking about teacher identity here. But could you answer that question? The third question I didn't get to was, what's your classroom persona? Who are you in that classroom? What do you do as a teacher in that classroom? And that's part of that. That's an extension of teaching philosophy, because that person who we are in that classroom, that's different than we are maybe who we are in private life. We should be able to distinguish between the two. And we have to have the right language for that. And that's not something we learn overnight. We do need some time to develop that. Uh, Something else I see here. How about this teaching philosophy for early years? To foster young minds with inquiry-based and critical thinking skills for helping them make informed decisions practical practical life. Well, that sounds pretty good to me. Okay. Because I know that if I heard somebody answer, if I asked the question at a job interview and they told me that, we're going to get into an interactive conversation. Definitely. Because that is definitely, the beginning of what I expect for somebody who I can get a feeling this person is understands what is happening in that classroom and what's expected out of them. And it says right here, would this response help in hiring teachers in Europe? Yes, Fatma, yes. As a recruiter now, I intend to ask this question and see what response I would get. Every recruiter, every school director, every school owner, every school principal, person who is in decision-making process should always ask the question, what is your TPAC, your teaching, your technology, pedagogical, and content knowledge skills? And the second question is, what is your teaching philosophy? And how do you see yourself in the classroom? What's your teacher persona? All of that encompasses under this big umbrella, teacher identity. Uh, Teacher identity is really what we're talking about here, but again, there's other things that are connected to that. Well, if we don't have any other, Mohammed, do you see any other questions here in the chat box? Fatma, thank you for asking those wonderful questions, because that was a
Yeah,
really important question. I would have totally forgotten that. Yeah, uh, but
some great questions here
mhm.
from Fatma. Yeah, we don't have any other questions as I guess. So everyone, feel free to drop your questions in the chat box if you have anything for
And by the
Ron.
way, I just want to say I hope everybody's having a wonderful Ramadan time. Yeah, I know that. Thanks to Fatma, I was able to be there in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, at the beginning of Ramadan, and hope to come back to Saudi Arabia and to Egypt soon.
Soon, very soon.
Okay.
So thanks a lot, Ron, for this wonderful talk and talking about this wonderful topic.
I would just like
Um,
to add, Mohammed,
yeah,
again, if you want to know more about it, and that's that thing that I guess that's why I, you know, have a lot of followers on social media, but my posts reach about 250,000 teachers a month on Facebook and LinkedIn. And I want to say that you can find everything that I've been talking about here today, teacher identity, and follow up on that with some posts that I made with wonderful links to understand teacher identity. There is also an article that I wrote with wonderful links to understand what teaching philosophy is as well too. And these things will help you to really create a plan for yourself and be able to answer the question, what is your teacher identity? What is your TPAC? And what, okay, is your teaching philosophy? Again, Mohammed, thank you very much for inviting me today. It was wonderful talking about that. I hope it wasn't too theoretical. Uh, and we can talk about teacher identity at another time, okay? But definitely, uh, I hope that all of you have a wonderful Ramadan. And Also, one last thing, let us not forget our brothers and sisters in Gaza, because this is very important that we not forget, just not only think about ourselves, but think about other people as well. Okay. So when we reflect. So thank you again and see you all later.
Yeah, so thanks, Ron, and thanks everyone for attending today, and see you next Tuesday with Antoine Mark, our usual speaker, and he'll be talking about creating role plays and business games that resonate. So we'll be
I
talking
highly
about,
recommend that. Antoine
yeah,
is
he's really good.
great with
He's really
that.
good with games.
It's
Yeah. So we recommend that you attend this webinar in 2 days. Yes, next Tuesday at the same time at 9 o'clock Cairo time, 10 o'clock Saudi Arabia time, and 8 o'clock where Ron is in Germany. So thanks a lot for being there and here, and see you next Tuesday. Goodbye.
Bye.